And I'm Keon.
And this is inevitable, that podcast with so much potential that just gets squandered because this week we watched Eating Pattern.
Written by the same people who wrote the previous two episodes and will write the next one, Lexx Gigeroff, Jeffery Hirschfield, and Paul Donovan.
This one was not directed by the person who directed the last two episodes. This one was directed by Rainer Matsutani.
And it was aired on September 4th, 1997. Yeah, and that's good that it wasn't, directed by the person who directed the last two episodes, because the person who directed the last two episodes was actually two different people, Ron Oliver and Paul Donovan.
That's what you think. That's what they want you to think.
Yeah, I guess Ron Oliver is probably just a pseudonym for Paul Donovan, for all we know.
Yeah, it could be pulling a Patrick Magoo in here.
Exactly. Just disavowing Supernova, yet avowing I worship his shadow. Well, if there's any episode of Lexx so far that I disavow, it's this one. I mean, I didn't think we could sink to even further lows than Supernova, sorry to say, but we have with Eating Pattern.
Well, I have a couple things I want to say regarding that right off the bat here. So Keon's doing this, ARG thing on Twitter, I guess, putting way too much effort into it, in my humble opinion, but, more power to him. And I saw it, before I had even watched the episode, and I thought for a hot second that he was somewhat serious, where he's like, oh yeah, I like Lexx now. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch Lexx and it's going to be good. Imagine my shock. Imagine my shock. 15 minutes in, I'm like, man, this sucks. Still.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm doing this. So if anyone is listening to this who also follows us on Twitter, you might have seen this. I don't know why I'm, doing it, but whatever. I also don't know why the one image that I actually put a bit of effort into editing came out so badly, but whatever. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Now. Yeah, I think there was just some glare on my screen when I was just covering. All I needed to do was cover up a portion of it with a black box, essentially, and I just did it in Paint because of how simple an edit it was. And it just came out looking like garbage. I think it was just glare on my screen, but whatever. No one probably even knows what I'm talking about.
No, probably not. And, on that topic of watching the first 15 minutes, so I watched this in a really dumb way now that I think about it. It was like 12:30 in the morning. I was before bed. I was like, okay, I'm going to watch some Lexx, and I'll watch, and then I'll just turn it off and go to bed at some point. Because I gotta be up, not like super early, but I guess 7 o'clock is early. I watched like 15 minutes, I watched 20 minutes, and still I had no inkling of like what the overarching plot, or the conflict, I guess. I guess I knew what the plot was, but like I didn't know what the conflict was gonna be still. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go to bed. And I'm just gonna go to bed.
I somewhat disagree with that. As much as I dislike the episode, I do think it's pretty clear what's happening right from the start. Unlike I Worship His Shadow.
Well, I think that's why I'm making a distinction between the plot and the conflict, because the plot is clearly, the Lexx has no food. The Lexx needs to feed, and it can't produce food for the people on the Lexx, but then they just like faff around on the Lexx for 20 minutes, not presenting any solutions to the problem, not going anywhere, not really doing anything about it until they're like, oh, look, the garbage planet, like, let's land here and see if there's a solution here. And then you're like, okay, now they're actually trying to do something to resolve this problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of like humor in quotes at the beginning. A lot of
humor is a word you could use for this.
Yeah.
And let me just, you know what? I just go, we always harp on the TARDIS wiki for being like this weird bastion of like weirdness. But let me just say, at least the TARDIS wiki doesn't like, I discovered this not 30 minutes ago, looking up the page on the Lexx wiki to get the information for this, that they have transcribed every episode of Lexx. On the wiki. They have a full transcript of every episode. Well, and also, by the way, the transcript for Eating Pattern is wrong because it's missing Stanley's last line of the episode. But anyway.
Well, hey, you know what Gandhi said? Be the change you wish to see in the world.
I don't want to be the change on the Lexx wiki. I don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that. The TARDIS wiki also doesn't need the transcripts because there are other sites that are just insane and have transcribed Doctor Who.
That's true.
Don't posit the insanity of the Lexx wiki over the TARDIS wiki when the TARDIS wiki is actually just not doing that because there are other insane Doctor Who sites. Well, hey, to be fair though, Lexplorations is a pretty insane site.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever went into Lexplorations and went exploring and found the creator of the site's nude drawings of both Kai and Zev too.
No, I didn't know those existed, but now I do.
I'm not linking those in the show notes. But I'm not going to stop people from going to find them. Not that I have the ability to do that anyway. You can tell we don't want to talk about this episode by the sheer number of tangents we've gone on in the first 6 minutes of this episode.
Yeah, maybe as a segment we can, you've already done yours essentially, although not as such, but I guess I really didn't want to watch Lexx this week's story is that I was about to watch it earlier today actually, and then I was like, you know what, I'm kind of hungry, so I went to get something to eat, and then when I started eating I was like, you know what, I actually wasn't hungry, I just didn't want to watch Lexx. So that's my didn't want to watch Lexx story for this week.
Wow, we are great podcasters. We are on top of our game this week.
You know what, I think Lexx is not, it's just not our show, because we obviously put a lot more effort into other shows like The Prisoner and Star Cops and such, and Lexx is just not our show.
Yeah, Lexx is just not us. It's just not our show. But anyway, it begins with Stanley asking for a meatloaf and all of the viewers at home being like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've only heard meatloaf is bad from people who eat meatloaf, and then I always wonder, well, why do you eat meatloaf then?
I've eaten meatloaf. It's just, as far as I can remember, it's just, ground meat made into a loaf. Not unlike a hamburger, Yeah. But I really related with Stanley right off the bat because he's really hungry for some good food, but all the Lexx is giving him is utter crap. And, I've really been hungry for some good content on Inevitable, a classic sci-fi podcast, yet all Lexx is giving us is utter crap.
Wow. You just turned that into a metaphor for the whole show.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, for some reason, Stanley decides that this is enough of a crisis that they should wake Kai. They also see a video message from someone who's like, hey, we're having trouble on the garbage planet. You should come help us out. And Zev was like, we should go there. And Stanley's like, how about we don't?
Zev suggests going there just because there might be some food. But you're skipping the best part of this intro is that there's a couple weeks time skip.
Yeah, just out of nowhere, it's it's been 2 weeks since I've had a good meal, and I'm like, Stanley, how are you still alive?
How are they even eating? Because what the Lexx is giving them is basically just this inedible slop, and it's not even that much. Even if you were to eat it, it's such a minuscule amount that you'd probably just starve.
I don't know.
I don't know. 790 is still on his exact same shtick from last week. Now, last week I just thought it was annoying. This week I think it's downright irritating.
I really hated 790 this week. I was like, shut up. Oh my god.
Oh boy. I feel like we should disclaim this somehow of or have a disclaimer here of we don't always rail into what we watch this much. It's just we really don't like Lexx. For anyone who hasn't listened to our earlier episodes, I guess.
Other content.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think they eventually just decide they need to go bury Kai because they wake him up from cryo sleep, but he's dead. So they land on the garbage planet to bury him, and they do that in like probably what is probably the only good scene, I would say, in this is his burial. Burial, however you pronounce it.
Yeah, Kai's dead.
Yeah, it does. I was thinking about what you said last week. It is like kind of funny and maybe telling that like the few scenes in Lexx that I say are like, yeah, that was a pretty good scene, all involve like the characters' impending deaths or like their burial or
Yeah. Again, continuing the theme this week and really like wondering,
Speaking of the characters and further irritation, it's not just 790. Stanley started off as endearing, but my god, he is just so irritating by now. I'm sick of all of them, especially Stanley.
I liked Stanley in this episode, if only because he was like, we just should not go to that planet. It'll cause us issues. And then they go there and it causes them issues. And I'm just like, Stanley, the absolute like idiot of the group, knew this. And you didn't listen to him. For good reason, but also like, haha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just some comeuppance or something, or like, I don't know. Yeah, to use the word you did when we recorded our Doctor Who episode right before this, check out Trust Your Doctor, Doctor Who podcast, Schadenfreude.
At the end when Zev is like, you were right, I was wrong, Stanley, let's leave. And he's like, what? Because he's all wormed up.
Yeah, my god, I almost don't even want to talk about the worms.
We are going to get there soon.
Yeah, the bug, as if the bug themed ships and everything weren't bad enough. This one is just like, I'm somewhat of an insectophobe.
So you're having a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Still.
Well, Zev decides she wants to explore, and Stanley's just like, no! Because we didn't mention that also the Lexx needs to feed. Maybe we did mention it, actually. And they can't take off yet because it's still recharging. And we get to see its disgusting mandibles, like, digging into the garbage.
The Lexx is just a space raccoon.
But it's not, like, cute, you know? Raccoons, I don't know, they're actually not cute, but, like, they're fuzzy, whatever, you know? There's something, I don't know. They're mammals, at least, so. The Lexx is just, ugh. It's almost the opposite of, like,
yum yum.
It's like the opposite of Liberator and Scorpio, which were, like, the aesthetics for those ships on Blake 7 were, like, they were so good. They were so on point. And the Lexx is just the diametric opposite.
The Lexx is a really curious design. Really curious. But hey, insect wars.
Zev is piloting the Moth, which I don't think we'd been introduced to the Moth before, but it's basically just this, like, smaller ship. Mm-hmm. They come across this, like, oil rig looking thing and decide to land. And then we get, like, probably a straight 10 minutes of, like, Zev exploring and Stanley just being like, Zev, it's time to leave.
Again, Stanley was right. Hashtag Stanley was right.
Stanley deserved better. 790, Zev, the Lexx.
Stanley deserved a better TV show.
Eventually, Stanley goes in because Zev isn't coming out. He pathetically threatens to leave a couple times also, which was admittedly kind of funny, because you know that he's not going to.
He's too enamored with Zev to leave.
Yeah, he still thinks he has a chance, surprisingly enough. I guess that's probably his strongest point as, like, a human being, is that, like, he's so disillusioned that he doesn't give up. Or sorry, he's so illusioned, not disillusioned. He goes in and he gets captured by this woman named Whist.
Mm-hmm. She is like, wow, fresh meat. Fresh meat.
This doesn't throw up any red flags whatsoever for Stanley. Like he's just going along.
He is so oblivious to the world around him. I'm quite frankly shocked he's lived this long.
Yeah. One thing that I really do like about Stanley is that, like, he hasn't had a costume change. He's still wearing his uniform from his guard job. I find it funny.
I think he wears that through, like, the end of the show.
It's really funny. Speaking of costumes, though, Whist's outfit is just unfathomable. I don't understand her clothes. How would you even put on what she's wearing?
The actress clearly figured it out somehow. It's like a spider webby looking sort of thing.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to describe it. Yeah. Anyway, Whist eventually asks Stanley if he wants to kiss her, and he's just like, well, yeah, I guess. And so, they kiss, and she obviously does something bad to him. I don't think we explicitly see what it is yet.
Mm-hmm.
But after that happens, he starts kind of having a pain in his neck, which we didn't mention, but the guy on the video recording from the beginning had something wrong with his neck.
Right. That something turns out to be a snake.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Zev has been captured.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, wait, that's not yet, actually. Now we're sort of thrown into this sort of almost non sequitur where we get this, like, Mad Max 3-esque society. The people who, I guess, live in this society, they or are part of this group, they're after pattern, which is obviously, you learn through dialogue is this sort of drug. And they play the most sinister game of Wheel of Fortune you can imagine, where it's like one side gets pattern, the other side gets one of their limbs chopped off.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and then they use that limb to make the pattern.
Right.
So it's just like, I mean, they're just in a race against time here for their species to die out. Like, they're going to run out of people to eat eventually.
This is all being controlled, though, by Rutger Hauer.
Well, I mean, yes, but actually no. I mean, he's playing a character named Bog, so it's not like the actual Rutger Hauer.
Oh, what?
That'd be pretty weird.
I thought it was.
No, I mean,
I'm
he's
kidding,
the actor.
I'm kidding.
Okay. I couldn't tell if you were serious or not.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Yeah, so Rutger Hauer, probably the biggest name actor in this so far, plays this character Bog, who's in charge of this society. And, he's a real sinister character. He's a real sinister guy.
Mm-hmm. Although he's also desperately addicted to the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So his menace is slightly limited by his handicap.
This is also the point in the episode where, if you're paying attention, which I, for some reason, still was, I guess. I really zoned out the last 30 minutes. Like, the title is a pun, right? It's like eating pattern, but it's eating pattern, the drug, so haha.
Mm-hmm. Haha.
My Lexx puns are better than that. Because they're more complex.
That's a hot take. Okay, well... this old man finds Zev and like tries to get Bog to believe that he's captured fresh meat, and Bog's like, I don't believe you. So he goes back and they're like, well, he doesn't believe us, so I guess we'll just process her ourselves, which comes back to bite Bog in the behind. 20 minutes later in the episode, he goes, you decided to, like, the first fresh meat we've had in years, and you decide to process her yourselves, you fools. And I'm like, well, to be fair, you didn't believe that they had fresh meat.
Look, Bog has bigger fish to fry. He has other things on his plate. He's a very busy guy.
I guess.
Yeah, getting high off his own supplies. When we actually see the effects of pattern, or like what it kind of does, it's just the most disgusting thing that Lexx has shown us so far, and that's saying something. Gotta say.
Yeah, it's impressive.
I didn't realize that Bog's the one from the recording until Whist brings Stanley in, and Stanley goes, hey, you're the guy from the recording.
Oh, yeah. Well, I recognized him, but yeah. Then I zoned out, and then I was like, that makes sense.
Stanley is totally out of his mind at this point. He's being completely mind controlled.
And yeah, because he's been snaked.
Okay.
Hiss, I'm a snake.
I think he lets slip that, like, Kai was freshly buried, so they decide to go and get his body.
Except, surprise, Kai's not there.
Yeah, Kai...
We totally skipped over a scene where he wakes up in the coffin. Whoops.
Oh, darn.
Actually, an important scene.
It was pretty brief.
It was brief but important for this scene now, revealing that he's not in the
You could have
coffin.
actually just skipped the scene and just been like, oh, well, he escaped. Would have made the episode like a minute shorter, and that would have been a minute less of our lives. We would have watched Lexx.
You could have in fact skipped everything between timestamp like 22 minutes and like 1 hour and 32 minutes when they're leaving the planet, and just like you would lose nothing. In fact, it would be more enjoyable.
This episode...
They land on the trash planet, they feed, and then they leave. That's it. It'd be great.
A 5-minute episode, and they get rid of Kai in the process. Hell yeah. God. We really do not like Lexx, do we? I do think Lexx is one of the worst shows I've watched in recent memory.
Wow, that's...
Yep.
Whoa, that's extreme.
Yeah. I don't watch that many shows, though, but I have watched some pretty bad ones, and Lexx comes close.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep. I feel bad for pretending I liked Lexx online and having people be like, yeah, nice, good job.
Including me. Have you betrayed us? Have you betrayed me?
References to a better show and a better time. Well, maybe not a better time. Yeah, a better time. A better time.
Well, anyway, Stanley's like, hey, I don't have Kai's body, but do you know what I do have? And they're like, what? And he's like, I got brains. I've got brains on the Lexx. Fresh brains.
They hop aboard the Lexx, take the brains of the Divine Shadows past.
And they turn that into some pattern, feeds him for a little while. Kai, meanwhile, has discovered a message from the original version of Whist, the human version of Whist, and she's like, I'm probably going to die. I'm going to try to kill the queen snake. It's the only way to win.
Yeah, and she reveals this whole backstory about this, the queen. Did they have a name, their species? I think they did. I don't remember what it is. Anyway, it's this species of like space snake that just, it's sort of this parasite that infects planets and people and basically just drives them to ruin like it has on this planet.
Mm-hmm.
And the original...
The snakes are the satellite worms.
Yeah, the satellite worms, exactly. The original Whist tried to stand against them, but obviously left this message of distress and failed. Now, I don't usually nitpick stories. When I interact with fiction, I usually just try and, I don't know, just take it in as a whole, see the overall meaning, whatever you might say. So I usually try not to nitpick like individual plot points, but my God, is it a pet peeve of mine when a character learns about like the secret history or past from a recording. And Lexx hit that, I hit that target. That's like my one target to hit of things I don't like, and Lexx did it.
It had to happen eventually, right? Like,
no, not every show, not every sci-fi show includes something like that. Like, I don't think Blake 7 did. But Lexx did, 3 episodes in.
Wister standing right there, and so Kai in this episode gains this like mysterious grappling hook that like goes full Assassin's Creed every time you use it, makes an eagle noise, just like like okay, sure, whatever.
Cool, okay.
Like at this point, whatever,
Look,
Lexx, fine.
No, well, look, if Lexx is willing to introduce something that's actually cool and not like gross or weird, then I'm for it.
I guess.
Anyway, yeah, Wish shows up and is just like, look at this, and like opens a hole in her stomach and just like worms come out.
And he's like, what the hell?
Kai's just like, all right, I'm done. This is too much for me. No, he doesn't. He just like murders her. Or does he? I don't remember.
He kills her. Yeah. I mean, there are multiple versions of Whist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he kills her, and then like the other Whist is just like, just shows up.
He eventually finds his way to where Zev's being held, and they like cut his head off, and he's like, I'm already dead. That doesn't work on me.
Mm-hmm.
I could not care less about the resolution of this story.
Yeah, this is about an hour into the episode, and this is where I was just like, you know what, whatever. Like, every episode of Lexx has that one point. This was it for this one, where it was just like, whatever, I just don't care.
Bog turns out to be like a nice guy turned bad by a situation because he's like, hey, can you get me off this planet? Like when Kai shows up, like, can you get me off this planet? Can you take me somewhere? I love to ride ponies. Can I ride ponies? And like, poor Bog. Been taken over by the parasite.
Yeah, so
now never gonna get to
we learned like that what Stanley kind of already demonstrated, but it's put into a bigger, it's taken into this sort of larger context here where you go like, oh, so like the parasite really is sort of changing their personalities. Bog wasn't really, the character we knew him as.
Mm-hmm.
But too bad because they all die.
Yeah, they all kind of go. I wasn't really clear on this, but they all kind of go to like where the queen worm is to feed the queen. I think it is, and so Kai follows them to go try and kill the queen, and in the process, the queen kills all of her subservient, parasites.
The hosts all die. They like there's this hole which I can only assume it leads to the queen, although I don't know if that's actually the case. But they all they dangle their heads over the hole and they kind of bleed out into, or the parasites, the satellite worms basically bleed them dry.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was a little unclear on this. That liquid that they were feeding the queen was pattern, right? Like they were getting high off of that.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The episode did a poor job of explaining that. Not that it could have just been one of those ambiguous things, but it was also, my being over it at this point that I was just like, whatever. This is a really gross scene anyway. I mean, you can literally see... This is where you really get a clear shot of, the worms coming out of the people's necks, and it's just gross.
Nice.
Maybe I'm oversimplifying things here, but, the 90s definitely had that, gross-out humor, just in general.
Yeah, I mean, Jackass was kind of that era, turn of the
and
century.
Nickelodeon Slime, even in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That definitely seems like a very 90s thing, and maybe because we're moving out of the 80s nostalgia period finally into the 90s nostalgia period, so maybe that's why Lexx is so big on the internet at the moment.
Yeah. Ugh. Then
It really is a microcosm of the 90s in much the same way that something like The Prisoner was a microcosm of the 60s.
Hey, at least the aughts nostalgia period is going to prove like pretty good. You know it's true.
Yeah, give that another 10 years, 15 years. Can't wait. I can't wait for the Doctor Who that's nostalgic for the Doctor Who of 2005, which was nostalgic for the Doctor Who of 1980, which was nostalgic for the Doctor Who of 1960. It's nostalgia all the way down.
I have a note here that says, how are there still 20 more minutes of this?
Yeah, me too, because like I thought Kai killed the Queen here, but that's evidently not true.
Yeah, so basically what happens is that Kai he confronts the Queen, and apparently the Queen can like transform or change her appearance or something. So
yeah, because that's how there's multiple versions of Whist walking around, is because the parasites have transformed into like mini versions or copies of her. Basically.
So first the Queen decides to try and fake out Kai by transforming into Zev, but Kai just like, it doesn't work on Kai. He just kills her, or attacks her rather. And then she transforms into a giant Whist. This version of Zev she transformed into was giant as well. And we should also be clear that the Queen's form is unclear, because we don't actually see the actual snake form of the Queen. You kind of just see her coils like slithering around or about or on top of one another. And yeah.
We do kind of see a little hint at her true form. The Queen, that is, when she's latched onto the Lexx after this.
Yeah. Which basically happens right now. They decide to leave. I don't remember why they leave, because they say, like, bringing Stanley away from the Queen will kill him, but they just decide to do it anyway.
Yeah, like, I guess it was like he killed the copy of Zev, but then like the copy of Whist went off to the Lexx. Well, Stanley leaves because he's still being controlled by the Queen, and that parasite's basically using him to go to other planets to feed on other people.
Right. People. Yeah, that's why he takes... So they go back to the Lexx, and then Stanley makes off with the moth, and that's why, that's the reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going after him, but the Queen is also attacking. It's as big as the Lexx, you find out, and it latches on. The Lexx is in pain. It just goes, ouch.
Ouch.
It says, did you miss that? It says, ouch.
No, I did miss that, yes.
And it's using its sort of snake-like tongue to penetrate the Lexx. And then it gets taken out by... I think this was foreshadowed way at the beginning of the episode where they mentioned the asteroids. It gets taken out by an asteroid. I think that's the case.
I want to say yes. I want to say yes.
And that's it. That's the end. Eating pattern, everybody. I personally give this episode a 10 out of 10.
Well, I agree if 10 is the worst.
Yeah.
Actually, no. I mean, it's not the worst thing I've ever watched. It's far from it. In fact, it's just... I found this week's episode, compared to the last two, a lot more dull. The last two's, at least, there was some, like, ridiculous 90s TV insanity that kind of kept you watching just to be like, what the hell is going on? But this one, I just didn't feel that. This one was just like, it was just dull to me. I don't have a better word to describe it.
Yeah, it was just really boring. I also feel as if the acting, maybe this is just me, but I think the acting on behalf of from our main cast is deteriorating. I don't know if you felt the same way, but
I mean, they were never great actors to begin with.
No.
But yeah, I mean, like Stanley is still the best actor out of all of them. Although Zev is actually, I think, like relatively speaking, gotten better compared to Stanley getting worse. So,
Perhaps.
but I don't know.
Gosh, yeah, this episode, I mean, Lexx as a whole isn't really offering much. This episode didn't really either. It meandered a lot. And, like, not in the good way. Not in the good way. It meandered in, like, a why am I, like, still here way.
And again, like I mentioned earlier, they set up like they need food and the Lex needs food at the beginning of the episode. Good, okay, cool. It was in the first like 5 minutes. I was like, okay, cool. But it takes them 20 minutes to actually like even attempt approaching a solution to that. And honestly, I couldn't even tell you what they did for those 20 minutes except literally just like bum around on the Lex trying to ignore the problem.
Yeah, again, like, it seems as if a lot of this show is dedicated to humor that, I guess, in both of our opinions, doesn't really land, like, pretty much ever, impressively enough. And I said this last week, but watching the show just feels like a waste of time to me. Like, after
We've only got one more
I know, but
left.
it's just like other shows. I don't consider watching shows to be a waste of time. I don't, because I don't consider fiction to be a waste of time. Like, there's worthwhile things you can get out of watching shows, just as there are worthwhile things you can get out of reading books. But like every episode of Lexx so far, I've looked back at the end and been just like, wow, I just wasted an hour and a half. Like, yeah, I don't know what to say other than that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even explain how like then the next day after watching it at 12:30, I woke up and I'm like, I had to go be somewhere at 8:30, and I was like, if I get up now at 7, I have to leave at 8. I can watch an hour of Lex. That'll leave me just like 15 minutes to watch when I get home. But I'm like, I'd rather just lie in bed, like straight up. I just rather not get out of bed right now. And I didn't for half an hour, and I'm like, I guess I should get up.
Yeah, but why squander the joy of like a Saturday where you don't have to get out of bed on Lexx, I think you made the right choice.
Yeah, gonna have to agree. Gonna have to agree. And on that topic, I actually don't really have anything else to actually say about um,
No,
eating
neither do
pattern.
I. I mean, I think we could just keep on going about how much we disliked it, but I think it's pretty obvious at this point.
Yeah, I'd really rather not like repeat ourselves that
Plus, we got a
much.
fair amount of feedback, actually.
Yes, we got a lot of feedback to respond to, but before we do that, I'm just gonna talk about
Hmm.
Rutger Hauer and do our German, Canadian, Dutch 10 actors of the week. Rutger Hauer, very well known in the sci-fi community uh, for being Roy in Blade Runner. God, how far the mighty have fallen. But like, this is okay. This is actually like before I talk a little bit more about what else he's been in, like they keep getting really big name actors in
Hmm.
this show. Like Tim Curry last week, Rutger Hauer this week. The first week there was I know we talked about him for Britain's 10 Actors, that really famous stage
I
actor, but
can't
I don't remember
remember.
his
Yeah.
name now. Was with a B. And like how do they do that? That's what I'm most actually curious about with Lex is how they keep getting these like clearly successful um well-known actors in the show.
That might just be us because, like, this show is, like, seemingly, I mean, it was pretty big and it is still seemingly really beloved. We're actually the outliers who say that this is, like, not good and just, like, crummy, you know?
I know.
So,
Yeah, yeah, I guess. I don't know though. It's interesting.
well, tell us what else Rutger Hauer was in because he's had a really extensive career. And he actually, I believe, passed away not too long ago. I think it was maybe last
It
year.
was
Yeah,
2019.
2019.
It was July of 2019. Although he's still got some acting performances that haven't been released yet. I'm seeing here on IMDb that must have been completed before he died, but hadn't been released. So let's see what I reckon. Kingdom Hearts 3,
Hey.
Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets, Gallivant, TV show I recognize, True Blood, The Letters, which I also recognize for some reason. I think that's a movie. Hobo with a Shotgun. Goal 2, Living the Dream sounds hilarious. The Poseidon Adventure is hilarious. Salem's Lot, the TV miniseries. Smallville, he had a couple episodes of Smallville. The 10th Kingdom, he was in a Kylie Minogue special. The TV show Merlin. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think that's pretty much everything that I recognize. Bunch of Dutch things.
Wasn't he in Dune? If I remember correctly.
Was he?
I think he was.
Oops. He was not, according to IMDb.
Okay, never mind.
Wow, just lying to the audience again, Kia.
I just thought he was. I wasn't sure.
Wow.
Well, the only other person I looked up, or rather the only person I looked up, was Doreen Jacobi, who played Whist. And yeah, here we go. I'm going to have to pronounce some German names again. Lexx was one of her earliest roles. She was in Der Kapitan, the TV series. Angel Express, there's a name I can pronounce. Helicops, Einsatz über Berlin. I feel like I almost would know what that means. Something over Berlin, obviously. Oh my god. I don't know how to pronounce any of these. Yeah. Just a lot more that I don't know how to pronounce. Crocodile Alert. There you go. Wer ist eigentlich Paul? Innocent. Zwolf Winter. I don't. Zwolf Winter. It's ZWOLF. So Z Wolf. I don't know if that's a real German word or if it's just like, I don't know, some robotic wolf, right? Like Z-Wolf. She was in Zerbrochen, Ein Fall für der Dr. Abel.
This is the most entertaining part of this.
You know what? For the fourth episode of Lexx, and probably the final one that we're going to cover, you can look up whatever German actor is in it. She was also in Ich liebe den Mann meiner besten Freundin.
I appreciate your commitment.
Yeah. Looks like she was in a lot of TV movies and TV series, so she's more of a TV actor, it seems. And that's that.
Huh. Well, guess we can talk feedback now. Two from Sergeant Drano, one about Supernova and one in response to our episode on I Worship His Shadow. So I'll read the Supernova one first. So last week we got Brad Majors, and this week we got Frankenfurter. Next week will we get Meatloaf? That's a reference to Rocky Horror Picture Show, I believe. I love the guy in the pod searching for the cure for a plague wiping out his people, only to be immediately killed without even being noticed. Really tells you what to expect from the show, kind of. I honestly don't remember that happening. Tim Curry feels a little like he's phoning it in this episode. He's just wearing regular clothes, regular hair, nothing like what we see the rest of the Boone and G wear. When Stanley's trying to control the Lexus landing, it reminds me of when Blake and Co were initially giving Zen directions. Zen asked what speed, Blake says standard, and then everything else becomes related to that. Standard by 2, standard by 5, etc. Here Stanley tries going for percentages. We get a bit more timeline in this one with a guy asking the Time Prophet about mineral deposits 5,000 years ago and Brunus 2 being destroyed 1,008 years ago. I do love the bit with the Time Prophet and Stanley Tweedle. Bizarre Deus Ex Machina at the end with the stars being sentient creatures who suddenly step in and save our crew from the supernova. We do get a repetition of this idea of cycles of time in which events of the universe replay themselves over and over again. I find that interesting. I'll be interested to hear your interpretation of what is meant by that. In closing, this was certainly a slower, quote, movie, unquote, with less going on. Of the 4 Series 1 movies, it is definitely my least favorite. Looking forward to your podcast. May shadow fall upon you, Sergeant Drano, Station 7, the door. Well, we didn't even recognize the cycles of time thing, so... Lol. Whoops.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thanks for the email, Sergeant Drano. Let's look at your other one. Lexx, I worshipped his shadow. Not worshipped. Hey gang, really enjoyed your first podcast on I Worship His Shadow. Sorry you didn't particularly like it, but the discussion at least was very entertaining. Lex is bonkers, so I'm not surprised you were overwhelmed and confused. Here's a few details it sounds like you may have missed.
Oh, we missed a lot. Yeah.
Lexx takes place after a rebellion against the League of 20,000 Planets by 100 reformed planets. The rebellion was led from 2 planets called the Austral B pair by the arch-heretic Thoden. Stanley Tweedle was from Austral B and worked as a courier for the Austral B heretics, carrying codes hidden inside his teeth. He was captured by the Sub-Ends, sub-nebula mercenaries, tortured and sold to the Divine Order. While they didn't find the code to the fractal core, the Divine Order did find both the codes to disable the planetary defenses of 94 of the reformed planets, resulting in the destruction for which Stanley is called the Arch-Traitor, as well as the amino acid codes to design and grow the Lexx itself. You see, the Lexx was originally to be the Austral B's secret weapon to defeat his shadow. The Divine Order co-opted it to use against enemies of his shadow. Thoden allowed himself and his key guys to be captured as part of a mission to reclaim the Lexx. The bug bomb was supposed to blow the circuit that was causing his restraints to release, but instead blew the circuit that scrambled the judgments being handled out, resulting in Thoden getting the Award of Merit and those kids getting sentenced to being devoured by Cluster Lizard. I think that's all the main points. Sergeant Drano, Station 7, the door. Well, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, simple. Yeah. Easy.
Simple. Yeah, easy. How could we not get any of that? You're fucking D-tier podcasting. D-tier podcasting. It's weak.
Well, yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Right. Yeah, thanks for the clarification and clarifying all those points. Yeah, sorry we didn't like it, but hopefully at least our discussions for the next one more week will be entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully this episode was entertaining, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we got a fair amount of feedback on the social media channels as well, so I guess we can start here on Facebook. We got a comment from Boz saying that, so he says, I watched the first episode again. This is on I Worship His Shadow. So Boz says, I watched the first episode again, having not seen it in an age. It's a strange one. What it sets up is a sound sci-fi concept, reminiscent of Blake 7 and Farscape in many ways. However, both of those shows are stronger in both writing and performance of the players. Having not watched much past this episode, I'll be keen to see how it goes. I like that Villa gets a starring role. But as Avon once said, the fire was stupid. Putting Villa on guard was suicidal. I totally agree with that last statement. And I said as much in my response. And Boz also, we got into a little conversation after that. He said he's going to be watching along. So, yeah, he'll be along for the ride for these 4 episodes.
Woo. We're not alone.
Hope you get more out of them than we do. Or enjoyment out of them, rather. We got another comment here. I can't actually read the name because it's... I don't actually know what language it is. I'll try to find out if I can and put it in the show notes, but I can't read it. But anyway, what this person says is, I've also been watching the first season so I can follow along with the podcast. It is a lot stranger and more confusing than I was expecting. The dialogue is terrible. The characters are ridiculously stupid. All the locations look exactly the same. Just pause this comment for a second. That's something that we should have mentioned while talking about this episode, is that goddamn did this planet look almost exactly the same as Brunus.
They all look the same. They're all just slightly orange-tinted trash planets. Like, there's no... We just watched Tomb of the Cybermen, and like think about that. Every room in that building had an interesting set design, and in this we have two sets. We've got the Lexx and we've got the planets, and even week to week the planet is like, oh, let's just no one will notice if we reuse the effects from last week, right? It's the 90s. Nobody's got a VCR yet.
Oh my god. I assume once it gets into the actual show, right, beyond the TV movies, there's going to be more variation. But yeah, for now, it's all the same. Anyway, back to the comment. They go on, the randomly inserted moments of sex comedy are jarring, but it is weird enough that I don't totally hate it. It's like the mysterious creators were aliens who knew nothing of television or human behavior. And I quite liked episode 3. Well, at least you liked it. Person whose name I can't read. Sorry about that, not being able to read it.
But we'll put it in the show notes. People can read it for themselves.
Mm-hmm. We also got some feedback here on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So this was on again. These are for I Worship His Shadow, or rather, this is because we only got one from Steven. So Steven says, or a comment from Steven. Steven says, I remember being shown the first episode several years ago and being put off by the immature humor. We're with you, Steven.
We're with you, Steven. Don't worry.
We also got some replies. I can't believe I'm going to be reading these, but yeah, I pretended to like Lexx online.
Yeah, again.
We got some replies to that. Making Blake 7, friend of the podcast, just responded with block. He doesn't like Lexx either.
Block.
Danny Danger at Danny Danger Oz says, interesting, what turned you? And yeah, then I responded with this stupid ARG thing I'm doing. It's not really an ARG because there's no game component to it, but it's just a role play, I guess. God.
For your own entertainment, really.
Mm-hmm. So Travesina B7, which is the Travesina and Blake 7 site / community. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're they have a Blake 7 forum that is you think of internet forums and you're like, all right, well those all died in 2010, right? But this one's still going. There's still a good amount of users on there, at least last time I checked. But anyway, Travesina B7 says, I love Lexx, and I'm tickled pink that my niece's husband is called Kai. I can't help humming the Song of the Bruin and G whenever she mentions his name. So someone else at Tempest Futile on Twitter says, haven't heard any Lexx fandom in forever. Got me nostalgic for my late 90s weekly double bill of that and Farscape. Dr. Oho / No Not the Mind Probe says, Lexx is awesome without question. And someone responded to that saying that they found this tweet while they were listening to the soundtrack Spooky.
Well.
Yeah, Lexx has a lot of fans, a lot of diehard Lexx lovers out there. Makes me almost feel bad. But since we don't get paid to do this, I'm going to give my honest opinion.
We shouldn't sugarcoat it.
No.
I guess.
No.
Shouldn't pretend like we like it just for the podcast.
No.
Oh, well, at least we're getting a lot of discussion. We're getting a lot of fans commenting on it, talking about it, and that's good at least. I appreciate that at least. I appreciate everyone who's reaching out to talk about it and give their thoughts on it.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think I'll ever see the light with Lexx. I don't think I'll ever, enjoy it or even really understand what people like about it as much as they might explain. But yeah, at least it does something for some people out there.
As long as some people get some enjoyment out of it, hey, more power to you. All right. Hello, friends. This is Keon and Dylan from the future. We have an email from Sergeant Drano about eating pattern. It's quite long. So originally we were going to put it in our Giga Shadow episode, which we just recorded, but we didn't want that episode to overrun. too much, so we figured we have the opportunity, because we're a week and a half ahead in recording, to put this in here instead. So, Lexx, eating pattern. Greetings, guys. Movie number 3. I like this one better than Supernova. It's got more action, and I think it does a good job of helping us get to know our characters better. Good job showcasing Kai in assassin mode, albeit as a good guy, as he relentlessly advances towards his objective. I was trying to think of how best to summarize the primary themes of Lexx so you might have a better idea of how to approach it. I think those themes can best be summarized as darkly satirical and deeply nihilistic, with just a dash of hope thrown in to make you think maybe things won't go horribly wrong, which they almost inevitably do. Lexx likes to take traditional narrative ideas and flip them or twist them in some way. For example, the character of Thodin from I Worship a Shadow is a fairly traditional heroic character. He is on this carefully thought out mission to reclaim the superweapon and save the day. He talks about the guys who died so that he could get the key to the Lexx. He knows about the prophecy regarding the loss of the Boon and G, but he dies unceremoniously in mid-sentence and his mission, for the most part, fails. Lexx is a universe that does not care about the narrative conventions of heroes versus villains, where random happenstance can ruin your day. A universe where the Death Star can accidentally get commandeered by a dumbass who then tools around the galaxy blowing shit up without thinking about it too terribly much. It's a story where somehow the main characters are people who would normally be relegated to the background. Sorry, lost my place. I think the other strength of Lexx is the complexity, but also simplicity of its characters. They aren't exactly terrible people, but they are just deeply flawed, regular people who've experienced ridiculous amounts of trauma. Stanley isn't a complete idiot, but he's also not terribly smart. He's a guy who tried to do the right thing in the past and got shafted for it. He knows that, other than having the key to the Lexx, he is completely unexceptional, has few skills, and is basically expendable. He's the red shirt who is self-aware of his red-shirtedness. Stanley is Villa if Villa somehow became the boss of the Liberator. Zev is probably the smartest, sanest crew member, but she is also extremely naive and inexperienced. She literally grew up in a box. She has only vague ideas about traditions and right and wrong, and she also has these powerful biological drives as a result of her love-slave programming and her cluster lizard DNA. Kai is probably best thought of as more like a robot. He has regained his memories, but he does not have a will, a drive, a self, or a motivation in the way that a living person would. He will often defer to other members of the crew for decisions, though he has been known to offer suggestions, especially as it relates to tactics or volunteer information if he knows it. You get the feeling that if Stanley or Zev did not need him for things, he would just stay in one place doing nothing until his proto-blood ran out. 790 is fairly one-dimensional. It has amazing computer-related powers, able to hack in and control all sorts of things or provide information dumps whenever needed, but is completely unhelpful to anybody except for Zev. 790 is psychotically fixated on Zev due to the love slave programming. 790 is kind of like Orak, only way more psychotic. The Lexx is a character too. That may have become a bit clearer with the latest movie. The Lexx is telling the story for this season. The Lexx seems to have a real affinity for Stanley, with about as much intelligence as a toddler. For the most part, the Lexx only does what he is told, unless, of course, he gets really, really hungry or really scared. But what about eating pattern? Pretty good setup on this one, with a not quite distress signal from the planet, a growing sense of foreboding coming off of mostly normal-looking Rutger Hauer on the screen. I like the Lexx twist on Star Trek food replicators, where you ask Lexx for whatever you want and he craps out a pile of something like mashed potatoes. We've got Stanley putting off the food shortage issue until it becomes a really big problem. We've got Kai unresponsive. Did you guys think he might be all the way dead? We've got the Lexx taking the initiative to get food. We've got Zev getting into trouble because she loves to explore. We've got Stanley pleading for everyone to just stay on the ship, wanting to leave her there, but not quite able to do that. I like the contrast of the old messages from Rutger Hauer and Wist, and then seeing how much society has fallen apart and changed since those messages were made. Rutger Hauer's, I wonder if it's Rutger. Well, whatever. Rutger Hauer's guitar-playing buddy is yet again Lexx Gigeroff making a cameo. Good, solid episode. I hope you guys liked it. Of the 4 Series 1 movies, it's my third favorite. Sergeant Trainer Station 7 The Door. Well, sorry to say we didn't like it, Sergeant Trainer. No. Maybe not sorry to say, but sorry to say, I guess.
And that's all we had for the comments on social media. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But if you would like to leave your own comment for us, you can
email us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Lexx. It was a weird segue because you never do the segue for that. I usually do it. You can find us on YouTube, Executive Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and wherever you find the podcast at Inevitable, a classic sci-fi podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. And next time we're going to be wrapping up the first season of Lexx / the TV movie season, I guess, with Giga Shadow. But until then, the end.